This video is to explain again the basics of producing an animated bogey for Trainz simulator. Now I just loaded Gmax and it may have been too quick there, but you should, so I'll close it again and open it again. Watch for the game pack flash to appear. There it is. You have to go through that. You have to load Gmax through that, and it changes the layout slightly of Gmax on its own. There's the icon top left of Gmax itself, but this is with the Trainz plugin installed, and that's, you open it by opening the Trainz plugin for Gmax. That's really important because a number of the aspects that you need for exporting into Trainz become available when you use the Trainz plugin. All those are and that's downloadable free along with Gmax, of course. Okay, so I'm going to make the simplest of all bogies, and it's going to comprise just of two cylinders which are going to represent the wheels. I'm not even worrying about the size or anything like that. In fact, it's enormous. It's 110 feet, 111 feet. Here's the size over here on the left. So let's make that 4 foot. It's going to make it very small. And the height, we only want height. Usually the tread is about 6 inches. So with the flange as well, let's make it 9 inches. So that's 0 feet and then 9 inches. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a moment, and we don't need any height segments. That's a height segment, just for those of you who are not sure. Let's go in here, and you can see it's made up of a number of layers. Well, we only want one layer, perhaps two if we're going to use one for the flange. I'm not going to worry about modeling the flange or anything. I'm just going to simply show how to make an animated bogey. But I'm going to take away those height segments. There we are. And the size 18 is adequate for a 4 foot diameter wheel, I guess. Now what I want to do is to make sure that it is centered, and what I want to do, so I'm moving its position. You can see it's moved across to that center line there, and it's 92 feet up in the air, so I'm going to take that down to 0 feet. So it's centered. X, Y, Z coordinates down here are centered on 0. So there's our wheel. Now I'm not going to texture it, I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm just simply going to show you the mesh because you know, it seems to be hitting a bit of an issue there. So it's going to be for UK standard gauge, British standard gauge, so that's 4 foot 8.5. So it needs to be, first of all we need to center the centerpiece, or the center line of the center mark of the wheel. At the moment, if we look at it, the X, Y, Z coordinates are off on one side. So let's center those. That's here, up here, top left, effect pivot only, center to object, align to world. That's very, very important. And now we've got it centered. But now if we check our position, we're a bit out down here, at bottom right. So we're going to 0 that again. Why bother? Well, it's good practice. So let's put the axle in. So it might as well be another, it's just going to be another cylinder. So let's, by holding down the shift key, select the cylinder, and it will make a clone copy, cylinder 2. Okay, that's fine. It's obviously too great a diameter and too short to be an axle, so let's give it a radius of 3 inches. That's too small. Let's give it a radius of 6 inches. There we are, that picks it up a bit. And we'll give it a length, although it's a height here. Let's do 4 foot 8.5. Just as, so 4 foot 8.5. Enter. There we are. Let's give it a different color. These colors are completely arbitrary, and let's center the line there, and let's put it back on the central position of the XYZ coordinate should be absolutely at 0. 0, 0, 0 down the bottom here. Okay, now let's move that gives us 4 foot 8.5. So let's select our wheel. We know this is 4 foot 8.5, so that's the gauge. So I'm going to move it out to there, zoom in as close as I can, pick it up and position it. So we know now that that is, if the gauge is 4 for 8.5, that's going to be over one rail. Let's clone that again, and this time I'm going to do it this way in the menus. Clone cylinder 3, and it's to 8.75, which is half 4.8, whatever it is, plus the width of the real wheel. Make that minus, that will jump out there. So there we are. There's a rather bizarre looking axle, but it's a very simple thing. I would suggest if you're having trouble with animation or with modeling anything like this, just try it using simple shapes like this. Okay, so that's our wheel set. Normally it'd be textured, of course. Now we're going to animate it. So for animation you always want the top view. So there it is. So now we're looking down on it, down onto the top. That's the front view, and here's one of the side views, the left view. But here's the top view. So I'm going to maximize that, and I'm going to create a dummy. Here we are, and I'm going to call it BR, because that's what Trainz requires, axle 01, and I'm going to center it. This is the centering aligning tool, so having it selected, I'm going to center it on the middle of the axle, which as we know is XYZ 000, so there it is. It's definitely there. Now I'm not going to try and link it or anything at this moment. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate that dummy. This is a non-visible dummy which will not appear in Trainz, but its actions will appear, and everything that's linked to it will follow those actions. So first of all, animate, and then we don't need a keyframes. The length of this is the time configuration. You see the little clock down there, time configuration window. You don't need to worry about any of this apart from length, and I would recommend 30, and you'll see the frame count jumps to 31 because that's 30 plus 0, frame 0. Okay, so, and if we were to run the animation, there's no animation yet, but if we were to run animation, watch down there, you'll see the frames zoom by. There we are, and it just keeps repeating until you stop it, and then take it back to 0. At 0, that's the 0 position that we want to start and end with. So let's go to frame 30, which is the last of the sequence, and we take our rotate tool, and now it's so important, you must be in top view, and you want to rotate on the x-axis. That's this one, left, right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it down, and I'm watching in bottom right, on the bottom there, the actual number of degrees that it's tracking, and you'll see my mouse has gone up to the top of the screen because I'm actually just right at the edge of the mouse mat. 359, 360. There we are. And trying to remember which one I use here to constrain the angles. There's one of those there. Anyway, so by frame 30, it's done a complete circle, 360 degrees. I think we're all agreed 360 degrees is a full circle. So now we can see it here. We can see the little dummy, and if we click on animate, it'll turn around. Okay, all very good. Right, so now we pick up our mesh, which is our axle, our first wheel and our second wheel, and we're going to link it. Here's the link tool up here, and we're going to select BR axle 01 link. And we can undo that. And now let's have a go at pressing that animation. Whoa, and there's our wheels going round. Right, okay, so is that the whole job done? No, it isn't. So this is just for a simple single axle. Now let's suppose that's all we want, so we'll make another dummy a bit bigger, and I always call this BR main. Don't know why, just do. And again we want that zero position, so it's actually overlaying that one. And now we're going to pick up just the axle 01 because things are already, these pieces of mesh are already attached to it. So if we display the subtree, we can see there's BR axle 01, that's the parent and these are the children. So that's the one, and this one isn't linked to anything. So BR axle 01 is the one we're going to select, and we're going to link it to BR main. Okay, right. Why do we do that? Well, BR main is not animated, and incidentally, once we've done the animation, we can turn that off. BR main is not animated, but it is the dummy which is goes to the attachment point on the rest of the locomotive or whatever. It goes on to the body, to the A point bogie 1 attachment point on the mesh for the body of the locomotive, the unanimated section. So if we look at this again, and let's play the animation, you can see that the dummy inside is rotating, but the BR main is not. But just to show that it is all connected, if I select BR main and I move it, just it's the only one selected. Everything else moves as well because it's all connected to BR main. Let's just go back. Okay, that's all very well. Supposing we wanted to do a 4-wheel bogie or even a 6-wheel bogie, then what we would do is we would take our BR, in fact I'm doing this backwards because it's already linked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlink BR axle 01. So now if I move BR main, nothing will happen. It won't move. So with BR axle 01, I select that, and now if I move this, let's move it that way. Let's move it in the Y direction. Okay, well that's the axle has been selected. We don't want that. We want the dummy, and let's move the dummy because that moves everything, and it's moved 6 foot. So I don't know what sort of engine this is. Rather bizarre to say the least. And now let's say we want exactly the same but a second set of wheels to give a 4-wheel bogie. So what we do, still with BR axle 01 selected, hold down the shift key. No, we don't want just that. See, my mistake. So BR. Now please note nothing is grouped at the moment. So that's what I should have done. I should have grouped this. This is a temporary measure, and then I'm going to clone the whole group. There we are. Okay, and let's move it down to, where was that positioned? It's positioned 6 foot or 5 foot 12 inches as it coyly puts here, and you can see it's moved there. Now let's check what is connected to what. We've got 2 groups and we've got BR main. Nothing is connected to anything else, so what we'll do is we'll take the first group and ungroup it, and it's crucial that no meshes are grouped when you export them. You must not export grouped meshes. And now we'll select axle 01, axle 02, and we're going to attach them to BR main. Okay, so now if we move BR main, the whole thing moves. We don't want that. And if we now press the animation, we've got 2 animated axles. And the key thing always when you're adding the animation, use it in top view, and always animate using your in this direction. Okay, so from the top downwards, never in any other direction, otherwise you'll find all sorts of bizarre things. Okay, so that is actually now ready to export, and well, what I do is I'm not going to export it because it's not a finished, it's not textured, but what I am going to do is show you some exported bogies. So this is the power bogie for the Liverpool Overhead Railway motor car. which I've released very recently, and this is the folder which contains. I always export to a folder first, and then I import the folder into Trainz contents using Content Manager. So you see there's a number of files here. Well, first of all, we have a series. We have the config.txt file, which I'm going to show you in a moment, and then we have the texture files, which are exported with the mesh and the textures to which they relate to, and I'm going to do a separate video about textures very shortly. And we've got a screenshot for illustrating. That's when you, in Content Manager Plus, when you hit Control I. We've got the actual mesh itself, which is the exported mesh. If I double click on this, the screen will go blank and I'll be offered a, there we are, mesh viewer. And here it is, and that is the actual mesh which I exported. So you can see there. That's in PEVSoft's mesh viewer, which is really handy. So it's quite a complicated bogey. As you can see, there are, you know, you've got your 4 wheels for the bogey, but there's also springing, framing, other odds and ends. And I tried to create the essentials of it. I didn't get everything in because it would be, you know, be a nightmare. But I did try to include as much as I possibly can in the way of detail. And in fact, there is some lettering on there, LOR lettering on there. So there you are. You can get away with quite a lot with the bogey, but the bogey is quite substantial. So let's just hide that again. So that's the mesh. But what also we've got here is animating. That is the file which transfers the animation, so it's animation kinetic movement. That supplies the animation to drive the bogey when it's in Trainz, and it's absolutely vital that you export that. So when you go to, if I just come down here, if we go to File, Export, well, it's just asking me where do you want this. So if I went to Trainz and I went to Tame Models, Bogey, I'd have a folder here where I exported it to. So I would choose to export it to there. And here you've got, and this is why you must have the Trainz plugin. You go through the load Gmax through the Trainz plugin. I've got, here's the IM file that you would export. Let's have a look in that Power Bogey again. There's the IM file, that's the mesh file. It'll also create a PM or something, other sort of mesh file which you can just discard. But also it offers you the kin extension, and that's for this. And that's what you, so once you've exported the mesh, you then export the kin, the kinetics file, the animation file, animating. And what will happen when you are asked to export that, you'll get a separate little window appear up here, which includes things like, do you want an event trigger? And that I think is used for, what am I thinking that's used for? I think that's used for signaling. You don't need to include that, but it's a simple little pop-up box. You just click on OK. But if you don't do that, you don't export. It doesn't export. So let's go back to our breakdown of what we've exported. So we've exported this. We've exported this in the config. So here we are. Here's my Power Bogey. There's a number of things you need to have. First of all, there's the mesh table and the power, and anim dist is crucial. Now that is the length in meters around, that's the circumference of your wheel in meters. And if you don't know how to create the amount, basically what you do is you measure it, or if it's in feet, so you take the, it's 2 pi r, so it's the radius times 2, in other words the diameter. So in our case it's 8, that would be 8 feet, and then multiplied by pi, and pi is 22/7, which is close enough for us. So you multiply by 22 and you divide by 7, and that will give you a much higher figure than this, because my Power Bogey is very small. But you must include that, and that's a bit of maths you've got to work out, and it's different for every bogey. If I go to one of my old, there we are, 10-foot Dean, there we are, look, and that's actually got a shadow on it as well for some reason. That's a 10-foot coach bogey. And if I was to have a look at that one, let's have a look. That's a Dean 10 foot. There we are, let's have a look at that. There it is. So that's my 10-foot coach bogie for Great Western Railway. Dean, and here's various others. Great Eastern paddle wheels. Let's have a look at Great Eastern paddle wheels, because they were a bogie as well for my model of the Brunel's brilliant steamship. Whoa, very big indeed. In fact, that's the largest of the. I've had to include that as a way of getting around the problem I had with it. So there we are. So that's explaining how you handle bogies, how you animate them. I hope it's been of use. If it has, please give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, and ask queries.